Hey everyone, this is Christian Heimel, host of Press Row. Thanks so much for listening to the following broadcast, courtesy of Public House Media.
This is Kim Meyer, the host of Choose to Rise here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Choose to Rise, where we talk about living with positive mindsets, how to increase our confidence, building our faith, and living out our life on purpose. A new show comes out via podcast every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And if you want to catch the episode live instead, stop by Public House Media around 6:45 Central Standard Time, Monday, Wednesday, Friday as well. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you'll never miss an episode of Choose to Rise. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Welcome to a brand new episode of Your Soccer Passport World Cup Edition here on Public House Media. I'm Brice Burge. He's Ivan Sanchez Carrasco. Ivan, we've got our quarterfinal set. 8 teams remain. More controversy, more questions, more confusion about who's actually moved past this last round into the round of 8. Just so much of the same kind of craziness so far in the Women's World Cup resonated in this first round of the knockout stage.
Yeah, a lot of controversy continues, but I thought there were some really good games. And both of us, you got 7 out of the 8 correct. I got 6 out of the 8 because of Canada. So we're looking pretty good ourselves too. So yeah, let's get to it.
All right, let's run through this bracket then for sure, because we've got everything lined up at this point. Germany beats Nigeria 3-0. Sweden defeats Canada 1-0. So those two will face off on Saturday, 12:30 Eastern Standard Time. Also on Saturday will be Italy versus the Netherlands. Italy won 2-0 against China. Netherlands needed a dramatic late second goal to win over Japan in regular time. Norway and Australia went to penalty kicks. Australia did their worst penalty kicks in country's history to lose that game 4-1 in penalties, 1-1 overall during the regular time. The biggest blowout, most definitive win will be their opponents for the Norwegians. That's the English side. They won 3-0 against Cameroon in one that is talked about for mostly the wrong reasons. And then your big battle of the Titans will take place. France beats Brazil, who Brazil gave a lot of extra tenacity in this game. They'll go up against the United States, who, well, there's not really a good way to say this, won despite the best efforts of their manager to lose that game. Yeah, so we're talking some historic levels of lack of faith in Jill Ellis before this one. So kind of just reacting to the time and realizing that the Netherlands-Japan game just ended moments ago. Let's save the other half of the bracket for the second segment, because there's a lot there with what happened to Cameroon, France, U.S., and then the closest game so far. So let's start off easily with the top phrase of this all. Germany wins 3-0, Sweden wins 1-0, and the European sides beat the Asian sides on the other quarterfinal. Was there anything that was overly surprising about these games?
I thought Japan in that second half was surprising. Probably their best game of the tournament, actually. And they ended up losing on a handball in the 87th minute. Questionable call, I guess. Some people say, there's no time to react. Her hand was pretty tucked in. It was a harsh penalty. And similar to Spain when we get to the USA game, Japan loses the tournament playing their best games. And you've been a little more critical than Japan than I've been, but neither of us have been overly impressed by them. That second half was the most dynamic I've seen them all tournament long. They attacked space, they created chances, they had the shots going off the post, they were forcing the keeper to make saves, and then it just gets taken away from them at the last minute. I'm a little disappointed in the way Netherlands played, actually, especially as the game went on, where they just lost complete control of the midfield, and they struggled to really create. And I think Italy is going to see that, and they're going to enter this game with a lot of confidence, I think. And that was kind of been the most surprising thing was, one, how well Japan played in losing, and how Netherlands kind of lost the game as it went on and just kind of got that PK at the end to really save them.
All that put together, though, the Netherlands had the same amount of shots on goal, or had more shots on goal, the same amount of shots as Japan did. For me, I look at two teams going the opposite direction, because even though that this was probably the worst game of the tournament for the Netherlands and the best game of the tournament for Japan, they were even setting. And while, yes, that was a tough penalty to take, it was a consistent penalty given the rest of the tournament.
Yeah, that's true.
So like, I mean, I'm not sure if I like that penalty, but the fact that there's consistency throughout games and throughout rounds, you have to give a little bit of a benefit of the doubt to the officials there, because out of all the problems that we've heard, the Deadspin report that said that VAR about goal line technology in terms of penalty kicks was brought forward just 3 weeks before the tournament started. There's so many things that are coming out with officiating that are well deserved to go after the officials for. I highly recommend going after the officials in this tournament, because it has been a straight dog vomit scenario. That being said, if you're at least going to be consistent when you get to these rounds, then there's a standard, whether you like the standard or not, that you can base things off of. And so, while I don't like the standard, it was consistent with the rest of the tournament.
I definitely agree with you on that. I think for all the problems that VAR has kind of had this World Cup, the refs, I feel, have been at least consistent in making those penalty calls and the handballs for foul, like the tackles in the box as well, especially defenders keeping the leg up after clearing it with high boots. I think there's been a consistency of the way it's been called. Just the calls themselves, I don't love. I think that's probably the biggest problem I have. But Netherlands move on, and I think Netherlands and Italy, it opens it up for a really interesting matchup, because one of these guys are going to be in the semifinals. I still think Netherlands are a better team overall than Italy. We can talk about that Italy-China game where China just couldn't do anything with possession. All with the possession they had, they created pretty good chances, but Italy taking advantage of those opportunities, especially in that second half, I think. And they got out of the hardest group. They're playing with confidence. I mean, they've been surprising people all tournament long. So it's a big toss up for me with that matchup.
I agree. I mean, technically Italy won that matchup in group stage, but I believe they lost it when it came down to the actual knockout rounds when dealing with the last qualifiers there for Italy versus Netherlands, if I remember correctly. But Italy is a solid squad. They came through the toughest group in the tournament, and they just beat China 2-0 with two earlier goals, one in the first half, one in the opening 5 minutes of the second half. They've been very stable. They've been very solid, and I don't know if they're heading the right direction. The Dutch side is, and so initially I was going to take Netherlands 100% in this matchup. I just don't know if I can do it now. I'm kind of thinking about it. I still haven't made a decision. We'll see how it goes when it actually gets closer to the time when we make our decisions next segment. Let's jump.
Italy doesn't beat themselves, though. That's the one thing I've noticed. They don't beat themselves. They don't make a lot of mistakes where other teams are able to capitalize on them. So I think
but that just plays into the Netherlands more, because the Netherlands is a squad that if they settle down and actually realize the possibilities that they have, their abilities to work it wide and then bring it back in with consistency when they're on top of their game, is second to none in the European class. I think that they're better than the Scandinavian teams or the Brits or the Scottish or anything like that in terms of really kind of using the outside in to create offensive opportunities. The problem is that they haven't been able to do it consistently because they haven't been able to get the ball started properly in the midfield to kind of set that whole scenario up, and that's because their midfielders have been definitively dropping the ball in terms of getting the offensive attack going. If the Netherlands can get a couple of players to get out of a funk, I don't think that Italy can beat them. But Italy is a stable team. They kind of remind me of like Switzerland in last year's men's tournament, where they're stable. They've got some different opportunities to them. They are forcing you to beat them at their best, which requires your best. And for a tournament where we've seen a number of squads drop a game so far and get lucky because they went up against either a lower quality opponent or got saved by VAR, that Italy's not going to be an easy beat, and it's going to require the very best. I think at the very best, Netherlands can beat them. I just don't know, based on this last game, if Netherlands is capable of bringing out their best game.
I agree with everything you just said. I do think Netherlands are a better team, and Italy doesn't beat themselves, but Netherlands at their best are better than Italy at their best. So yeah, it'll be a good matchup though. But
that's my toss up one. I mean, that's kind of like the Sweden Canadian game earlier. You know, like I picked the Swedes in that one, but you know, it was dumb luck that happened anyway. So well, let's talk about that matchup here as we wrap things up. Sweden ends up winning 1-0. Blackstein's 55th goal, or 55th minute goal, was the difference maker here, as Canada had more shots but less shots on target, more possession, more pass accuracy, less fouls, less yellow cards, less offsides, more corners. Like, statistically, they should have won this game, and they didn't, and it was annoying. Like, this was a game that I thought that Canada was very good at starting to pick and choose what time they wanted to attack. You kind of saw that, but they had struggles kind of getting it started in that whole scenario for them. And it was the exact same thing in this case. They just completely panicked when they let a goal in, and it was this has to be in a lot of minds the closest game score-wise, but one of the more embarrassing losses for Canada in program history.
Yeah, and they missed a PK as well. That could have tied it up. Fantastic save. This has kind of been the problem we've talked about with Canada, though, entering this tournament, is can they take it up that next level? Can they be elite? And to do that, you have to do little things right, and they didn't. I picked Canada just so we could have something a team that we're not going to agree on for these when we predicted. But this Sweden team is good too. This Sweden team plays without fear. They play with confidence. They're very organized, and they they make the most of their opportunities and their chances. Something Canada hasn't done. I'm disappointed in Canada actually, because I thought they would. I thought they were more of a quarterfinalist team than a round 16 team, but this kind of been the problem that I've been harping on them the whole tournament long, is they struggle to beat the elite teams, and now in this matchup that was pretty even, they couldn't even do that.
Did Sweden win this game, or did Canada lose it?
No, Sweden won it. Sweden won it.
I don't think so. I really don't think so. And that's what's frustrating to me, is that you create opportunities and then there's nothing coming from it. You had good defense this entire tournament, and you weren't able to put goals up to match it. And Canada's lost, I think, 12 of the last 14 matchups that they've had against European sides. I mean, this is a consistent issue for Canada, where they're almost kind of like a Washington Nationals or a Green Bay Blizzard or San Diego Chargers type thing, where you go out there and everybody's harping on you to be better than what you are, and then you don't beat any team of quality. You have a lot of wins, but they're never any quality wins in themselves. And this is a struggle for Canada, especially with Sinclair on the way out. Some of the younger players not having they're getting good reps in foreign leagues and in the NWSL, but they're not in leadership roles. So there's a whole kind of like identity crisis that has been looming over Canada for a while that is now there for Canada, and things are only going to get worse to the side.
Yeah, I agree. The generation's kind of the older generation's out. This is a new generation. Have what it takes to keep that level of consistency, or is it going to fall off? I'm kind of with you that I think it's going to fall off, but yeah, I don't want to take anything away from Sweden because I think they earned the right to play and win. But it's disappointing if you're Canada and if you had expectations for this Canadian team, they really let you down.
Big news coming up on the other side of the bracket, including that controversial U.S. win, the penalty kicks in Norway versus Australia, and ethics issues in the England-Cameroon game. All that coming up next.
This is John Lauder, host of The Cheap Seats here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, The Cheap Seats, where we talk about sports from the fans' perspective. A new show comes out every Monday. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of The Cheap Seats. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Welcome back to Your Soccer Passport World Cup edition here on Public House Media. I'm Brice Burge. You can find me on Twitter at @Brice Burge, Brice with an I. He's Ivan Sanchez Carrasco. You can find him on Twitter as well. Ivan Sanchez C90 is his handle. Always a good time for the soccer news and strong opinions on Ivan's Twitter handle. All right, so the other side of the bracket right now, we talked about the top half, probably the easier half when you think about it all. But in this next round, we kind of talked about how upsets could possibly happen. A drama could happen in different ways. The Battle of the Titans were looming. Could somebody maybe steal something or force late time? And some of those things happen, but not in the way that we initially thought. Australia ends up taking a red card later on. I'm not sure if I consider it a red card. It's definitely a card, but Australia eventually gets a player sent off, survived the penalty kicks, and Sam Kerr skies that thing like she's kicking an extra point. It was arguably the worst penalty kick that she's ever kicked in her career. It set the tone for the PKs. Norway won 4-1 in that one. They're going up against England, who won decisively, but nobody's actually talking about the decisiveness of that one. They're all talking about Cameroon's issues that happened in that game. So let's talk about the actual soccer first in Norway and Australia. What were your thoughts on this one?
I left really impressed with Norway. I thought they were kind of lackluster in the group phase, but this game, they were able to kind of keep Australia keep Kerr especially pretty neutralized. Maria, I'm going to butcher this last name, Thorisdottir, the defender, number 3, was fantastic in frustrating Kerr, keeping her shut down. And you saw that frustration lead all the way into the PK situation. Once they got that red card and got the man up, Norway were much more dynamic on offense. They were going for that win in extra time. They were attacking. I was really impressed with Ingrid Enger, the midfielder 14. She was fantastic in the midfield. You had Guro Ratin, the player playing a little higher up, also great in the attack. I was just really impressed with them, and they surprised me a lot. They surprised me from that match. And I think if you're England, you are worried about Norway. I'm considering taking Norway to beat England if we want to do quick predictions. But yeah, I just left very impressed with that second, with the overtime, the way they attacked, their confidence, how cold-blooded they were in the PKs. something Australia wasn't. I think I tweeted and commented that Norway reminded me of unseasoned chicken, and then the PKs happened, and I was completely wrong because they threw in so much sauce there, and I was just left really impressed with them.
I'll agree. I mean, Norway was not really a bad squad, but with them losing some of their top players in similar situations to the political stuff that's going on in the United States.
Oh yeah, they're missing the best player in the world.
Yeah, that's kind of a big storyline, but it's allowed them to step up. I mean, Maren Melde has been an absolute rock star in terms of solidifying the midfield. Wrighton over the top, Graham over the top have been really creative in their opportunities to shine in this case. I would love to see them more at the club level, really shine. I think both of them have it. But when you start going in this, you were talking about those defenders, and one, I got to say, I'm really impressed with your pronunciation here. Usually I'm the one stuck with the Scandinavian names. Now, you did drop the Swedish pronunciation compared to the Norwegian pronunciation, which is all about like the syncopation of the names and the syllables there. But the Thorisdottir was just amazing on defense there. And
she's been great all tournament long. I've been really impressed with her.
Yeah, and so this has been this Norway team kind of reminds me of those like no-name defenses in the NFL. It kind of reminds me of like Columbus Crew when they won their first championship. Like there's not all-stars out here. It's just good team chemistry, and it's just people playing to their best potential. With the exception of Italy, Norway has been the team that has really kind of stepped up and played to their best. I thought that they were frustrated against France. I thought they were kind of caught off guard with a lot of things, and if they had their best lineup out there, then I think that they may have actually tied with France, given how stable they've been throughout this tournament. They're a team that impresses without they impress with humility, is what it comes down to, and that is one of the most Scandinavian things that I've ever seen, especially coming from a part of the country that has the number one Finnish American population in the United States, and the number one Finnish Canadian side is just across the lake. So you learn a lot about Scandinavian culture, and they're nailing it. Their team is nailing it. This is a hot team right now, and I don't want to be England, because England just took a very different type of game in their matchup against Cameroon. And I want to move over to that one just because I want to make sure that we have time to talk about everything. Because that game against Cameroon, 3-0, things were pretty much over 14 minutes into it. Just 7 shots, 4 on target for the English, but 69% possession, 78% pass accuracy to just 56 for Cameroon. But nobody's talking about the soccer in this one. There's been a lot of issues right now. Cameroon kind of got bit on the VAR. I will say that I do not like the VAR decisions that were made, but again, I'll match what I said in the first segment, that yes, it was consistent, which is ultimately a sad, sad thing for any soccer fans out there. But now FIFA is investigating the behaviors of Cameroon after that. The FIFA president for the African continent said that there will be punishments that will be brought down, and that Cameroon has disgraced the continent with their behaviors for a continent that right now is in a lot of turmoil in terms of whether or not these nations even have a female team, with the problems that were brought up against Equatorial Guinea and the qualifications. There's just so many problems with women's soccer in Africa right now. This was the last thing that continent needed, was to have Cameroon flip out. And while I will defend their right to free speech, their tactics were kind of morally left, without merit. And it was very frustrating to watch this game. It was very frustrating to realize that this was not about the game; it was about the extras.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. What Cameroon did was really just kind of embarrassing overall. I thought the England players handled the awkwardness of the situation with class. I thought the head coach, what he said about the example that presents, was right on the money as well. This is the last thing this tournament needed, because this tournament's gone on pretty, besides the VAR, everything for the most part has gone on really smoothly in this tournament. And I've been really impressed about how well everything's been organized, everything's been handled. And for a team like Cameroon who qualifies in that last minute to win their last group stage, they had all this goodwill happening for them as well, scoring in that last minute to qualify. And for them to do that, it's embarrassing. That's more what it is. It's just really embarrassing.
More penalties can be assessed at this point for Cameroonian players, specifically the ones against Alexander Takanada, Augustine Ejandui, and Yvonne Lueko for their issues early on in stamping and spitting and elbowing players from the English side. This is more of an issue for one side than the other, but for England, they've got to figure out how to flip it the entire time. In a lot of ways, it's interesting because for me, when I look at them moving into the next round, and they know that they've got either France or the United States after that, they now have to focus. And you know, we talked about how much we like this Norwegian squad. Norway could have been a trap game at the round of 8 if England didn't have to go through the weirdest things that they had to go through in this last game against Cameroon.
I will. If we want to make predictions now, I'll go Norway over England.
That's the thing, is that I'm not making them now. I'm gonna wait till the last second because I'm still trying to figure this out. Because the thing is, for me, is that Norway would have been that trap game, no question. I would have picked England. I was actually talking about picking Australia over England anyway. But the problem is that now that I see that game, and they had to deal with something that was so ridiculous, they can use the Norway game to ground them again and start focusing on soccer. Because they did what they had to. They were professional. This England side, you talked about it earlier, and I want to reiterate that because I like the fact that the English side took this classy. They were put in a bad situation, and they 100% did not retaliate. They did not add to the problems that were happening between the officials in Cameroon. They went out there and they represented themselves and their country to the highest regard. A+ for England. That being said, that being said, though, is that when you walk into that locker room, and you've probably been in this situation more than I have been as a player, but when you walk in the locker room, you got something awkward, like how that whole situation went down. You're not thinking about the next game. You're still trying to figure out what to do with this one. And that whole kind of grounding aspect of just taking an extra day to kind of mentally recharge after an oddball game is going to allow you to refocus yourselves better for going up against Norway.
Oh, I agree. And I think England is probably the better team. But I talked myself, after we just talked about Norway, I'm talked myself into just going for them and just taking that hot hand.
You know, personally, I'd rather see Norway. I just statistically I can't see it, unless it goes to penalty kicks again. I think they're better at the PKs, but England has a lot going for it. I think they've got a stronger attacking midfield. I like the fact that they're able to just kind of move up the middle and then kind of do like a give and go scenario that I think is really strong for them. I think really only the French have that give and go aspect that's so strong. In terms of advancing the ball. I like the English side a lot in this scenario because of the matchups. And England's also won, I think, 3 out of the last 5. It's been 3-1-1 in favor of the English in this case. So, you know, hot hand in the tournament versus hot hand over the matchup is
Give me
an
Norway,
issue.
baby. Give me Norway.
Okay, I'll take England, but off the record into the recording microphone, I'm gonna root for Norway.
All right.
So let's kind of bounce now to we've got a little bit here before pressing buttons, but the next aspect of this game, or this tournament, is really the one that we've been talking to for a while. And I'm also going to have to use a phrase that I will trust the editors when I tell them about this, because I'm not sure what the Public House Media style guide is on this scenario. But the potential for a shit show is there and waiting as France beat Brazil and the United States beat Spain. That phrase actually coming from Megan Rapinoe in her comments to the press earlier in what was probably the most wholesome definition of a shit show that I've ever heard, in the fact that she's excited about the two teams having to have tough games beforehand, that these are the two favorites, that everybody had this game marked on the calendar even though there was no guarantee that either team was going to be able to be there anyway, that you have two of the best teams in the country, in the world right now, facing off of against each other, two of the best offenses in the world facing off against each other, in the host nation fighting against the defending champion. There is 100% the possibility that this is going to be an absolutely crazy game, and Megan Rapinoe herself said that. She says she hopes that the shit show, because this is the kind of games that, as players, as fans, as countrymen, that you hope happens in a tournament like this. And I'm pumped for it, because this is really where we're kind of setting up to, and where we've been building to since the draw has happened, has been this quarterfinal matchup between France and the United States.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited for this game. I think they both got tested. Brazil also probably played their best game of the tournament and lost, similar to Japan. Similar to Spain. Spain were also fantastic. And I left watching that Spain-USA game we were both high on Spain entering the tournament, and we saw them play USA without fear. And I think that's the first time this tournament where you saw a team really play USA without fear. And I think France is going to will have equal amount of no fear for this USA team, and I think it's going to make a really interesting matchup, especially when you consider all the criticism that Ellis is getting from her coaching decision, her subs decisions, or lack thereof, and everything that kind of manifested itself into that game for the U.S., considering that they won off of 2 PKs. This is kind of the matchup we were all wanting, we were all hoping for and waiting for, and there's a lot of expectations for this game, I think, from neutrals, from fans of both teams. I think we're expecting this real showcase, and I mean, at least that's the kind of feel I'm getting from what's already been a couple days now to the lead up to this game.
Honestly, there's so many storylines to this one. This might be the number one storyline game of women's soccer that I can think of since I started covering women's sports. I've had some interesting storylines be brought up in hockey or football or something like that, but for soccer, this is it, without question. Because I look at this whole scenario, and I look at Rapinoe being the one that sent them into this level. It wasn't just us that had talked about Spain being the darlings of a tournament for a while. I watched these games in as rural of America as you could find, and it was interesting because I went to the same location. I watched the Men's World Cup game against Trinidad and Tobago. I watched the U.S. World Cup game against Spain. I watched the France game against Brazil, all in the same location. And you would not expect a bar in the middle of nowhere, 500 miles away from the nearest host city for a World Cup game. And it's actually Toronto because of how close it was all to everything, instead of a place like Chicago or something. But the fact that people were paying attention to this was huge. And all those comments about Rapinoe, hearing some of the most red and conservative people that I've ever met discuss about Rapinoe's politics, discuss about what it would mean to beat the French, discuss what it meant to win another title and bring that title home when the U.S. couldn't even make the tournament in the men's side. The storylines are there for the fans. I'm thoroughly excited. One, that as podcasters that are covering this, that there are educated people out there and there are educated fans that understand what's on the line. And two, I'm excited that there's going to be a matchup that is deserving for people that are kind of breaking out of their comfort zones to actually get there. And it's one of the more powerful moments for me personally. I know this is kind of a sidetrack based on where we were actually discussing this matchup, but it just kind of fell out in its own way. But this has been an amazing opportunity for me to try to see the growth that a lot of people discredit in women's sports, soccer in the United States, liberal policies in conservative America. There's so many aspects of it, and that's not even with the game. There's so many of it, and it's just it's a lot to handle, you know. It kind of catches you off guard a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think the build-up will just continue as well as we get to this, and I mean, this is the matchup you want. This is what I've really liked from this World Cup has been the growth of these other nations. Like when you look at Spain, you know, you and I kind of put our eggs into that basket a while back, and they didn't disappoint. They didn't disappoint at all, and I really like the fact that this U.S. team has kind of leaned into being the villains. I think they've kind of taken it and ran with it, and they've kind of have been happy to do like us against the world mentality. This French team is loaded with talent. This French team is really likable. There's so much quality on there. You have all those Lyon players, all those PSG players who have helped bring the European game, the women's European game, to a different level as well. So even if you're neutral, even if you do follow soccer, this is there's so much more to learn, especially when you start digging deep into this French team. When you talk about Henry in the midfield, and you talk about all the quality they have and all the and everything they bring to the table to make this an equal matchup, it gets you like really excited for Friday.
It does 100% of the way around, you know, and you know I'll delay a little bit more. You know, the people that were using lacrosse or hockey terminology to explain what they saw, but not actually kind of make the direct comparisons to soccer, is amazing. People are finding ways to watch these games because they're so compelling, and I think that's one of the reasons why. To kind of bring it back to one of the things that were brought up so predominantly this last week was the criticism of Jill Ellis and the fact that literally nobody, regardless of what kind of knowledge you had about soccer, whether you had played it your entire life or you were watching it for the first time because it was, you know, exciting to you, not a single person thinks that Ellis did the right thing in terms of the substitutions for the United States team against Spain. And I'm going to join them by saying, what the heck was she thinking?
I don't know. I mean, yeah, why do you wait 80 minutes in a game where you are struggling the most you've struggled all tournament long to make a substitution? I don't get it. Alex Morgan could barely walk. I don't understand why she's staying on the field, why you don't bring in Lloyd earlier. I don't understand why they didn't bring in Haran earlier to try to control the midfield. She's a professional. She should be able to go 10 minutes, 15 minutes without getting a card. You should have the trust in her to believe that she can do that as well. Yeah, she got out coached and almost bit them at the end. And if she does that again against France, they will wreck the U.S. if she coached. France is good enough to beat USA if the coaching is not up to par.
I agree. And when you have Jessica McDonald that was out there or Allie Krieger, I think Morgan Bryan probably could have been brought in there for a midfielder opportunity. and just kind of stabilize that entire set. Spain did exactly what we thought they were going to do in terms of try to create an opportunity over the middle to kind of frustrate the United States, but that would have required a shakeup from the 4-3-3 that Ellis has just kind of fallen into. Yes, she's got the one thing that I'll give Ellis is that Ellis has to deal with a problem that literally nobody else has ever had to deal with in the women's game before, in that she has the most stacked and the deepest offensive-minded team in the history of the sport. That being said, if you're not going to use the depth, then what's the point of having them? And that was what really kind of burnt the squad. There were plenty of players out there that could have gotten their first opportunity to go. This is a tight enough group with the way that this team is set up and the way that they've rotated through players consistently in warm-ups and everything else, that when you're saying, hey, Rapinoe scored that last goal, everybody out. Line change. Go. There's nothing that could have really strengthened the United States squad even before that second penalty for Rapinoe that she converted. They were soft penalties to begin with. The fact that you're
consistent.
But again, they were consistent. But even though they were soft penalties, it's still to the level that if you wanted to spark something, go put out one of the other world-class offensive-minded players that you have loading your roster.
And let's not forget, that defense looked shaky yesterday. That defense did not look good. The keeper did not look good. Any pressure that Spain would put on them, they really struggled to try to play the ball out from the back. Dunn is a fantastic attacker, but she's not a good. She can't defend. They have a forward playing left back, and it's great when they move up when they're on the field, but she can literally not defend. She gets too tucked in when they're with the back line, leaving the outside too open. She struggles to keep the person in front of her marking wise. And I think that's kind of like kryptonite for the U.S. is the back line, that goalkeeping.
And that was a position decision that was shaky at best, that could have been replaced in a different way. I mean, but the thing is that if you wanted help in the midfield, why not take out Dunn right away and replace her with somebody like you could even put it like a Krieger in there and do something. And there are so many options that they had that were not really given up that created problems for the United States. And I think everything that's been said about Ellis has been deserved. And it is frustrating because it creates a level of doubt for the more in-depth fans going into this matchup. Let's now talk about predictions, though, because I think now is the time to do that because we're kind of leaving on a cliffhanger on that side, so we'll end back with it. We'll start up top with predictions here, maybe a sentence or two about each game. But Germany versus Sweden, Saturday at 12:30 Eastern p.m. What do you have in this one?
I'll go Germany. Very underrated how well they played this tournament. Germany. Even though I do love the Swedes, but unfortunately I will go with Sweden, or I'll go with Germany.
I will too. I think Germany kind of had that entire side of the bracket on lockdown since last round. I don't really see anybody else kind of shaking that up. All due respect to Sweden. Let's now move to the other side. Their eventual opponents will be either Italy or the Netherlands. Who do you got in this one?
Netherlands, for everything we talked about earlier about them just kind of being a better team than Italy. So I'll go with Netherlands.
I'm gonna bounce that again too. I'm gonna say that the Netherlands win on their game is a better team. It's just a matter if they can do it. I think it's still gonna take them 30 minutes to get into this one. So like if it's still scoreless at 30 minutes, I'm gonna take Netherlands. But it's gonna be hard for the Dutch to kind of rebound after everything and come from behind if they're down at half. So while I'm picking Netherlands, there's a lot of there's a still wide open door there for Italy if they want to take this one. We talked about Norway and England. You're taking Norway, I'm taking England, so we'll skip to the next one. France against the United States. Who do you got in this one and why?
I am going to go with France.
Why?
I um I think their attack is enough to put the U.S. under pressure, and I think they'll make less mistakes. And yeah, I mean, very hesitant. I'm like, he's taking probably, yeah, I'll go France.
When I look at it all, it's going to be a fun one here. But Google win probability has United States up 41 over France to 29 to 30% of a draw. I really like a scenario of 2-2 going into extra time, and I can't imagine a scenario where the French can't beat Jill Ellis. The French won't beat the United States. They'll beat Jill Ellis, though, and I'll take France to win in extra time. So just to run down who we've got, you've got Germany, Netherlands, Norway, and France. I have Germany, Netherlands, England, and France. And for my fandom, I hope that I lose all of those. All right, 30 seconds. What's your shout-out?
My shout-out's Marta. The composure in which she spoke after that defeat to France, and the message she sent to the Brazilian Brazilian girls was really beautiful. And, to have that composure after a defeat of that nature just speaks volumes to Marta as a person. And yeah, that was incredible.
That will do it this week. We'll have another episode later this week, but that will do it for this episode of Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media.